how do we strike the balance between improving and trying to improve and trying to get better at our kendo and not burning out? When we push ourselves and we push our people too far and they start to burn out, but we have to get them up to speed because we've got a shiai next month, all this sort of stuff. It's a really tricky one. What do you think, man?
Man, that's a great point, eh? I'm sure you have done that before. You burn out. And I did too. One thing I think is a very important thing is that you always have to have a goal, and you always have to have, encouragement. Why you are doing it? Why are you doing this? Stupid kakari geiko that makes you tired all the time, but there's a certain goal there. So if it's for shiai, maybe to win, and you don't want to lose, so you're doing that to better result. And if it's for sandan exam or dan exam, you should have specific goal and the reason. You have a good reason why you're doing it. I think that's very important. What do you think, man?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Having a goal is something that I think a lot of us know. We're like, yeah. I want to pass my sundown this year. So we have these goals, but the problem with these goals is that if they're too big, if they're too broad, they run the risk of A, not being able to achieve them because how do you measure it, and B, overshooting the mark. And that's what you're saying. If we keep going without really knowing what the destination is, we can overshoot it and we can go much too overboard and burn out potentially. So I think it's really important to find the balance between pushing ourselves towards that goal and not overdoing it and burning out. And it's such an important problem for coaches in all sports, let alone kendo, to consider, man, because there's a lot of pressure on athletes. There's a lot of pressure on coaches to try and win. So, having a conversation about this, where do we draw the line? How do we avoid burnout? I think it's a really worthwhile conversation to have.
Having a specific goal is good, but at the same time, if training is too hard, it's not good either.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because at the same time, like I think it's a pretty common mentality, at least it was when I was training competitively, to push. You don't want to do less than your competitor. You don't want to be standing up at the edge of the shiaijo or the corner of your arena for your grading and think, oh man, I haven't done the work. I haven't done it. And be thinking that, because that's a real source of anxiety for a lot of athletes. Whereas the alternative helps to build confidence. I'm here, I've done this. And so one of the things that we miss a lot, at least I missed a lot, was the importance of rest and recovery. So when we set those goals, you mentioned before about setting goals and being very, very specific. We talked about being specific about those goals. Part of that goal setting plan should be to include rest and recovery. So this is a day that I do nothing. This is a day that I do a light walk or a little bit of saburi, or, even if it's something along the lines of visualization and going through your pre-performance plan. What are you going to do when you get to the shiaijo or the arena? What are you going to do the night before? Those things don't require a lot of physical activity, but they do have a big impact on your performance. So those rest and recovery days can be scheduled in as part of your goal and actually used in much more effective ways, rather than just going to the dojo and doing kakari geiko until your feet bleed. And really starting, the problem with it is that we end up really disliking training. I don't want to go to training today because I cannot be bothered. You know what I mean? And that's a real... Say it again?
Or you might get hurt.
Yeah, and you could get injured, 100%, exactly. So rest and recovery is a really, really key part of the whole equation when you're setting your goals to try and strive to get better, to do well in the shiaijo or pass your grading. But part of that plan, and we'll talk about this in other videos, I'm sure, how do we set these goals? One of those things when we're setting those plans is to include rest and recovery.
So The other thing, I think it's related to culture stuff as well, dojo culture. If you can go through very hard training if you have good relationship with your dojo mates. If you have emotional support from them, or you can give emotional support to each other, this is very helpful. Again, like, family members, if your one is down, you can give them, some kind of support. Maybe you are lower grade holders, but, you can give them some kind of support, always. So it's not always higher grade holders giving other people, lower grade holders something to work on. But at the same time, lower grade holders, they can help them, help higher grade. Like, I want to pass some balance, or so I need some support. And by seeing my students doing a good job, that is already emotional support for me. So that kind of culture really is important. This emotional support can be a good factor to help you not to burn out.
Oh, man, 100%. The emotional support that you can get from everybody in the club, no matter what grade they are. And this goes back, we've talked about this before in terms of transparency. This is what we want to do. This is what we're trying to achieve as a group, as a club. Some of our sensei are going for higher grades. Some of our lower grades are, looking to do some shiai. Whatever that is, if we're all transparent about that, then we can support each other in those journeys. And so when it gets really horrible in the middle of winter, and I know in the northern hemisphere you guys have got winter going on, down here in the southern we've got the hot weather, but particularly when it gets cold, it gets hard to go to training on Wednesday night. And so, man, if you've got that culture and we're there and we're transparent about what we're all trying to achieve, then we can provide emotional support. And so when it does get tough, and we are being held to, accountable, and everybody is expected to turn up and take the warm up or do the saburi or do the gore or whatever. When that stuff gets really horribly hard to do, to have that emotional support from each other in the club can really help to offset that demotivation and that thing where I just don't want to do this. I want to throw my goals out the window. I'm burning out. To have that culture underpinning it, man, it makes a huge difference. Another part of that for me is about the relationship, I guess you could say, that you have with Kendo. And depending on what your goal is, depending on what your driver is, if it's shiai, that's fine. There's a certain level of competitive expectations on you, and that can lead to burnout if you don't have it in check. But I think what's really important here, and it sort of underpins everything that we're talking about, is balance. It's not the be all and end all. And even for a professional sports person, that gets paid to do this, they're still people at the end of the day. They still have family, friends, other commitments, even though their job is the sport that they're playing. It's not necessarily the case for most Kendo players, particularly outside of certain nations where you're amateur. And I think it's fair to say that most of us aren't even really amateur. We're hobbyists. We do Kendo because we love it. And competition is just part of that, and gradings and so on. But to keep that in mind, I think is really important. We're not trying to constantly win, constantly pass the next grade, because there's other pressures going on. There's other expectations. And again, that balance to go, right, you know what? I'm gonna need to prioritize something else now in order for me to maintain or sustain this goal into the future. I think that's perfectly natural and perfectly fine. And it's probably like, if someone listens to me saying that, they go, well, yeah, of course, man. But it's so easy to forget. And so then we come back to the purpose of this channel. It's to talk about solving Kendo coaches' problems. One of the things that I think when we're facing burnout, or athletes that are having burnout, what is it that we need to do to solve that problem as the coaches? You've talked about emotional support that comes from everybody in the club as well as the coach. But we have to keep that in mind as the coaches. How do I encourage this person to maintain a balance? You know, like, I know that they're having troubles at home. I'm going to help. I'm going to, you know what, man? I've got you. I'm going to take care of this. Keep in touch. Let me know when you're ready to come back. It's not the be all and end all. If you don't sit this grading next month, it's okay. There's another grading. You know, if you've got a sore shoulder and you can't do the kakarigeko, that's okay. Recover, rest, get better, balance, because it really, I'm going to piss some people off by saying this, it really doesn't matter. It just
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's cool to go to. It's cool to to try and win and do those. That's cool. It's cool to practice and train and pass your grading. Totally cool. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you do or not, because there will be other opportunities. And as soon as you sort of figure that out as an athlete, and sometimes we need to be told, the coach's problem, your job to solve this is to help people go balance. It doesn't matter. You don't necessarily need to be at every single competition. I think that's really key thing to remember when you're working, particularly with young adults as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great point. And I think it's very important as a coach, we have to do what we preach. So, I say I have to train for certain things, but as probably a lot of people know, I have bad shoulder and all, and then when it hurts, I can't keep going. Well, in the past, when I was younger, took painkillers a lot, and then I just kept going. Decades later, I had to have surgery. So that will happen. And at the very end, maybe at that moment, that's what you wanted to do. We didn't know we didn't have to do it. At the very end, you have to balance. Maybe you want to do it, but if you want to keep doing Kendo, for the rest of your life, you have to consider what should be priority. Is it healing or training for whatever you're training for? So I think it's very important for coaches to be a good example to those other people, I think.
Absolutely, man. It's easy to tell everybody. It's easy for us to sit here and say, this is what, balance is good, blah, 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 blah. But we actually has to start here, eh? And I think we've got a certain advantage with that, because particularly for you and I, we've been there. We've been competitive. We've pushed ourselves really hard. We've pushed through injuries. And of course, a lot of our viewers will have as well. What's important when we take on that coaching role, that sensei role, the senpai role, whatever you refer to yourself as in your club, is to lead by example. These are the standards that I set for myself, and therefore I encourage you to follow suit. And part of that is knowing, okay, I've overdone it in the past. So take it from me. That's not what you want to do. Otherwise, you'll end up like Hiro Imafuji, a broken man with dodgy joints. Hey, Hiro, good chat. As always, what we're talking about is solving Kendo coaches' problems. So hopefully this has helped you out a little bit. If you have any other problems, what do they do, Hiro?
Comments.
Hit the comments, and we will follow up. Always good to chat to you, Hiro. Thanks, buddy.